Today is Monday, May 5th, 2014. We're here for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. I would ask that you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to call a roll.
Gudenkauf.
Here.
Deuter.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Polumsky.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Hipskin.
Here.
York. He's absent. Levin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Onquist.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
13 present, 1 absent.
13 present, 1 absent. We have a quorum. On to agenda item number 3. Receipt of written communications from the public. Is there anybody in the audience at this time who has any written communications they'd like to submit? If you do, please submit to Clerk Spencer. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, agenda item number 4, public forum. This is an opportunity for anybody in the audience to address the council on any item they so choose. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes out of respect for the work we have to do here and other folks who may want to speak. If you run over your 3 minutes, I'll give you a gentle reminder and ask you to wrap it up. Clerk Spencer, at this time, is there anybody who's signed up for public forum?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'll start with Diane Stewart, 622 Euclid.
Please approach the microphone, state your name and address, and your time will begin after that. Thank you very much.
Diane Stewart, 622 Euclid. It is regarding the proposed condemnation of the property owned by the Olteen family adjacent to the Public Works just south of the garage at 985 South Riverside Drive. The current garage parking lot has plenty of room at this time. It's very disorganized. There's many things that are out there. Treadless tires, broken hockey nets, old TVs, garbage, cups and bottles. Previously, I called about 6 5-gallon buckets of paint and turpentine that sat on the back of the property for 2 years. It was removed once I called. There's a drum of kerosene currently sitting on the back of the property, along with garbage that flows to the north and the east of the retention basin that I pick up daily. The city is not maintaining the property that they have now along more acreage that they plan on buying from the Olteens. To expect the taxpayers to pay for the purchase of the Olteen property at the time that the streets are in need of repair and taxes are being raised for DuPage County pensions does not make sense at this time. As far as the security goes at the garage, items such as expensive equipment and brick pavers sit out in the back near the basin. All weekend long, the gates are up, and it allows people to come and go as they want and hitch up a trailer and take it if they wanted to. There's constant flow of teenagers that pass the back of the property, especially when it snows, and they sled and drink beer on the back of the garage. In the last 2 weeks, I have found 2 containers of gasoline in the woods just north of the garage. Elmhurst is not Mayberry, and the owners of Keefe Brothers just north of the garage can tell you because their tools were stolen off their property just a few months ago. I ask that the city rethink the purchase of the Olteen property and the expansion of the city garage, put the money into better use for flood prevention. If the city does purchase the land, I would hope that they will leave some as open wooded land to prevent further flooding, as common sense no longer prevails over the south end of Elmhurst and concrete continues to grow. The residents must take the added cost along with the environmental impact and the lack of security within the public work area, which allows flammable liquids to be stored outside where residents and anyone outside near the motel, near the garage can access. Thank you very much for your time.
Donald Dianasutas. Dianasutas?
Thank you. Donald Dianasotis, 1004 Medina Street in Bensonville. I ask, in a spirit of transparency, why is the executive session necessary to discuss the sale of city-owned property? Anyone?
This is a public forum, it's just your opportunity to speak.
Oh, I don't get a response.
Not at this time, I'd be happy to discuss it with you
I already got a
afterwards.
response, I got nothing. Okay, it's quite important in my mind. Transparency is quite important in government. Even though I don't live in Elmhurst, I live in Bensonville, I believe in the transparency. Thank you.
Claude Pagash, 566 West Gladys.
Claude Pagach, 566 West Gladys. I attended the last meeting and found that the discussion of the council was rather ridiculous. We can't have a referendum on the garage because we invested $6 million. Why do we invest $6 million? Supposedly we got contracts and we got partners. I never hear about the partners. Never hear what they do. They're partners. How much have they invested? Council never says. How much are they going to get out of the parking garage? That's kind of an interesting thought, isn't it? They'll invest nothing and reap the benefit of the money of the residents. On top of it, the partners are never here. It's the council that insists it be 6 stories. Partners don't. Partners suggested 4, and we're happy and content with it. Partners didn't say we'll have an office building. Council said that. Mr. Kapp brought it up, and that was rejected. And the city gets involved. Got a partner. 6 stories, it's got to be 6 stories, can't be any less, got to be 6, because we're not going to pay in the future for additional 2 stories. But all the paperwork submitted by the city about number of parking spaces and everything else got turned into confetti. Unrealistic, if you really analyzed it. And what I find most interesting is the design changed because the public stated you couldn't get out of the alley. So now we got Addison all tore up. Additional expense. But where's our partners? Why is it that every time somebody comes to this town with an idea, it costs a resident? It's not your partners that are yelling for a 6-story, it's this council. And the council now wants to change the rules because they want maybe metro parking. But that wasn't the whole concept behind this. I've been told endlessly by the council that if we build it, Addison will bloom. There'll be more people coming down here to build things than the Egyptians when they were building the pyramids. But let alone we got an outlet metro in. And it's the city's parking garage.
Mr. Pagash, I'd ask you to wrap it up.
Non-taxable, Mayor. And I asked last meeting, and I'll ask again, just what does the council and the mayor think a resident is? I assume the press would be more than willing to print your answers.
Lisa Gerhold, 139 Elm Avenue.
Lisa Gerhold, 139 Elm Avenue. I am the current chairperson of the Elmhurst Cool Cities Coalition, and I'd like to share a few thoughts with you tonight about the public recycling initiative that is on the agenda tonight. I'm glad to see this initiative getting started. In the 6 years that I've been involved with sustainability issues in Elmhurst and with the Cool Cities Coalition, public recycling is the most common thing people ask about. We hear things like, why doesn't Elmhurst recycle in city center? And I wish Elmhurst had recycling downtown. While public recycling is just one of hundreds of things a municipality can do to reduce its environmental impact, it is also an important one, and one definitely, and most definitely, one that the public notices and wants to see and be able to do. I want to see this project be a success, and I believe it will be important to research some best practices prior to implementation. These are a few of the things that can contribute to the success of public recycling programs. First is a commitment to making it work, communication with the recycling facility where the materials will be taken, recycling bin placement next to refuse containers so people can see that there are both options available, a smaller opening on the recycling bin than on the refuse bin to help people think before they toss, clear and highly visible signage and color coding on the new containers showing what should and should not go in the recycling bin, and then last of all, public awareness, which is something that the Cool Cities Coalition would be happy to help with once this gets underway. I'm happy to offer further input, and I'm looking forward to seeing this project get started on the right foot. Thank you.
Marla Sarnes, 617 West Gladys Avenue.
Marla Saris, 617 West Gladys. I'm here tonight, I'm going to keep it short and sweet, because I would like to access local pasture-raised eggs. To have that happen, I would like to have my own backyard chickens. I've been doing research on this, and today called the city to find out further details on the restrictions on it. I was told that backyard chickens are not allowed in Elmhurst, and my first question is that I'd like to know why that is. I did a little bit more research, and I had done this in the past, but I had then picked it up again today to find out the reasons why after talking to the city. Apparently in September of 2012, a referral was put before the appropriate committees and with over 700 signatures supporting backyard chickens. This has apparently gone through one committee and is supposed to be waiting for public safety to add it to their agenda. And my second question is, I'd like to know what the holdup is. And that's all. Thanks.
Praven G. Patel, 638 South Sunnyside Avenue.
Praveen Patel, 638 Sunnyside Avenue. I'm here to tell something about the new stormwater policy. I am an engineer by trade, and I have worked in drainage calculations and projects in the past for Illinois Department of Transportation and other municipalities. As a city council is considering this new ordinance or policy, I would, my recommendation would be to consider it very carefully, and it will be detrimental to the property values, and it will not work for individual lots and as a separate units unless city comes up with a comprehensive public policy on public lands. Thank you.
Michael Crumry, 400 block of Crockett. I can't read that. Of the 400 block, is that what she said? Of the 400 block of Crockett.
Michael Crumry, 570 West Crockett. Freedom of speech is not dead in Elmhurst, Illinois. No, freedom of speech is simply restricted to 3 minutes. Freedom of speech is not dead in Elmhurst. No, residents are simply challenged and asked if they have a master's degree in the topic of discussion. Information provided by residents only needs peer review subject matter experts within the specific field of discussion. Freedom of speech is not dead in Elmhurst. But beware when people before you have been treated in a combative nature. Sure, step up to the microphone. We want to hear what you have to say. During the last city council meeting on 4/21, while residents spoke, the chairman had 3, 4, or more interactions with individuals sitting next to him. Members of the audience clearly witnessed these sidebar conversations, but unfortunately the city video did not. Also during the public comments on 4/21, at the 27-minute mark, I stated, quote, that when public input was provided, our voices were simply discarded or ignored. I had to pause in mid-sentence due to a distraction from the chairman reviewing multiple pages of paperwork. My talking points were on a single page that night, so he clearly was not reviewing anything that I had submitted to him. Later in the meeting, at the 1 hour, 46 minute, 37-second mark, the chairman gives the floor to Alderman Gutenkopf. At the same time, the chairman reaches to his left to retrieve some paperwork and starts to review the documents. The city video then moves to focus on Alderman Gutenkopf, and the noise of shuffling papers can clearly be heard in the city video. At the 1 hour, 48 minute, 17-second mark, Alderman Gutenkopf had to pause 5 seconds to regain the attention of the chair. Does anyone care to guess the topic on which the alderman was advising or addressing? Anyone? That the residents of Elmhurst feel that their voices are not being heard. Yes, freedom of speech is alive and well in Elmhurst, Illinois, but please, please don't be disappointed when you soon discover that only a few people are actively listening.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline. That was a really good previous comment. There's a few things I wanted to address tonight. First of all, I see that absent from the agenda, surprisingly, is the oversized Addison parking garage. I kind of expected to see a follow-up from the report that was approved last time. The next thing that would happen would be a resolution or ordinance to happen. Obviously, that's not there tonight, so clearly time isn't of the essence when it comes to the Addison parking garage. If we have time to still continue working on it, what would have been nice is for the Zoning and Planning Commission to hold an actual deliberations session about the issues that were brought to their attention. That did not happen. We heard a little about that started at the previous council's discussion. Some good points were brought up by two aldermen in particular. That discussion should have happened in the Zoning and Planning Commission meeting, not at the vote on the dais here. And I was a little disappointed that those aldermen who clearly recognize that the parking that's going to be built once the ceremonial final vote is taken, whenever that is too much parking compared to what really theoretically should be being built, still voted in favor of the oversized parking garage. Another thing, I noticed a new narrative starting to happen around the parking garage. The downtown plan uses the phrase adequate and convenient parking, and the definitions of adequate and convenient are open for debate, I say. But those are the two words in there, adequate and convenient, that's supposed to be provided in the city. What isn't stated in the downtown plan is the word free, adequate, convenient, and free parking. We have free parking after 5 p.m. and on weekends, that's great. But now we're getting the language being said by the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce president said adequate, convenient, and free parking. And that was echoed a week later by one of the aldermen. So it seems like this is a new phrase that we're supposed to be incorporating, adequate, convenient, and free parking, which means the city shall never in the future even think about charging for parking by customers, even though someday, not today or tomorrow, but someday that might be something that the city wants to do. So if that's the language that's going to be started, please be aware of it and listen for it. And the last thing is that I think all these pieces tie together with an underlying theme, which is that city policy seems to me is being dictated by a small number of insiders, chiefly business insiders in city center. The latest evidence of this occurs in a newspaper article where I read that a subcommittee of the city center board is going to be looking into making the A-frame signs on the sidewalks legal. That's what the city manager's saying. Since when is it the city center board who's responsible for deciding what is or is not going to be legal in town? The city's job is to enforce the ordinances that exist. We're currently ignoring ordinances, at least for some people, not for everybody, but for some people. And it seems to me that if we're going to have outside private special interest groups advising the city council, that should be open to more than just one private interest group. Thanks.
David McKenna, 286 East Crescent.
Before I start, the horizontal fluorescents, are they off for a reason? It's pretty dim in here, and excuse me while I put these on. David McKenna, 286 East Crescent. First and foremost, I am a lifelong resident, a father of two that go to schools that my father, and grandparents also went to. I belong to numerous organizations, charities, and boards in the community, and I am also a builder. I have had the privilege of, and hope to continue to, participate in the revitalization of this town. all of which has been done carefully, planned and implemented with durability, sustainability, and impacting in mind. The stormwater policy up for approval tonight has a number of unanswered concerns. I do appreciate the work that the staff and committee have put into it, but I caution against its ratification without full considerations. The policy's formula may be nationally used, but the variables used as multipliers are not, and these are at the core of the issue. Last Monday, Mr. Burke stated this policy is intended to mitigate for additional burden on the storm system by a new home versus the older home. Okay, I agree with that. You can't argue it. But let's store for just that. If you were using the building of the same or smaller home, it no longer matters. You're going to have to compensate for 60% of your entire yard, and that's the number being used to store for. Most of the time, the policy will be asking people to store for water that is hitting their grass. Rarely, if ever, is a new home hitting a 50 to 60% impervious mark. But this would be penalizing everyone for just that. I provided current examples where after storing for the new home, its driveway and its patio, I would still need to store for 3,300 square feet of ground-absorbing lawn. This policy also leaves no incentive for an owner to consider permeable drives or patios, no reason to try and alleviate the basement's impact or to think with conservation in mind. Mr. Burke explained that these numbers were used to cover in advance for any future sport courts, swimming pools, second driveways being installed. Make additional storage a part of the permit at that time. How can we justly force someone now to serve a penance for a maybe, possibly, someday, could be, might do in the future project? Staff attests that the units installed in the past year have never been empty, which is contradictory to DuPage County stormwater guidelines. These bubbles of water are designed to concentratedly infiltrate into the soil. Naturally, this will occur very near to a neighbor's home's foundation and drain tile. New water table for them. Additionally, there are questions dealing with the maintenance and ecological impacts that are unanswered and supposed to be worked out at a later date. Forcing someone to store an amount of water they are not even closely impacting simply for the benefit of we have to do something is an injustice. Implementing a policy without addressing real-time concerns of health and safety issues and neighbor impacts is also inherently irresponsible. The end cannot justify the means if character and integrity are the foundation for city policies. Thank you.
That's all who signed in tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. That's it for everyone who signed in tonight. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address the council that did not have an opportunity to sign in this evening? Anybody? Okay, I see one man. Please approach the microphone and give us your name and address.
My name is Tim Grant. I live at 160 Sunnyside in Elmhurst. I've lived here for 8 years. I own multiple businesses in the community. I have a landscape company and a construction company, and also have rental properties in the community. I'm here to speak on behalf of the stormwater policy that you guys are going on tonight. To me, it's just, there's too many things overlooked. There's a lot of faults in it, a lot of studies that haven't been done or overlooked, or that are just being lied to about that says this is going to work. I've talked to numerous city employees that literally state that this will not stop the flooding. There's not enough of it. The ones that are in now do not drain or will ever drain. We live in a clay soil. The water goes sideways. It will not go down. I've done numerous dry wells. After 5 years, 90% of them will not work anymore because they fill up with silt, debris. It doesn't matter how good you put fabric around them, how well you take care of them, they will fill in. Taking the water off the roof and run it into it, you're automatically putting dirt off your roof, everything into these. They're gonna clog up. Next thing you know, you got a swamp in your backyard. For the tanks, none of the tanks on Pine Street have ever been empty. They fill up within 15 minutes of a rainstorm and flush the system when most of the floods happen. So by doing this, you're putting most of the water at risk with your neighbors by putting more water next to their foundations, going to their sump pumps, and who's gonna have that problem when they start suing your neighbor because you have this well in your backyard that's putting more water on their sump pumps? So by this, I think it should be pushed to do more study, do more of these calculations. It's not a cost factor. I think it's more of an issue that this will not work, will never work. And I think it's just a loophole for you guys to pass it and say we're doing something to help the flooding. They're gonna be repaving First Street next year. Why don't they put a pipe down First Street, put it into the quarry? That just solved all your flooding issues on the north side of Elmhurst. I just think more issues, more things need to be looked at and concentrated, and you'd get more results than these tanks trying to push them through. Thank you.
Anyone else that did not have an opportunity to speak, please raise your hand.
Could I change my question to a comment?
Noted. No, well, you've already had your opportunity to speak, sir, but I'd be happy to talk to you after the meeting. Seeing none, we'll move on. That concludes our public forum portion of the meeting. Announcements. Are there any announcements on the dais this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on. Consent agenda. Agenda item number 6. Is there anything on the consent agenda that anybody up here on the dais would like to have removed for additional comments, questions, or consideration? At this time, is there anything anybody would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 8, please.
Item number
6.8. 6.8. First page.
6.8, yes. Anything else, Mr. Dunn?
Item 6.7.
I didn't hear you, Mr. Dunn.
6.7?
6.7. Okay. Anything else that anybody would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items 6.7 and 6.8. Ask for a motion. Alderman Deuter with the motion, second by Alderman Wagner. Clerk Spencer.
Deuter.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York, absent. Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
13 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent.
13 ayes, 0 nays. That motion carries. Consent agenda is approved, less items 6.7 and 6.8. Clerk Spencer, could you please read the recommendation of item 6.7, report out of Public Works?
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Works and Buildings Committee that the City Council authorize the purchase of 6 recycling containers, associated costs for the necessary twice-weekly collection services. The committee further recommends review of said pilot program in the fall of 2014. Signed by Jim Kennedy, Chairman, Chris Healy, Vice Chairman, Michael J. Brand, and unsigned by Diane Gutenkopf.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Kennedy, second by Alderman Healy. Alderman Kennedy, your report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very simply, as the recommendation stated, this is something to create a pilot program to look at recycling in the Central Business District. We talked about this in 2 meetings, and thanks to city staff for all of their efforts, and I look forward to the questions that Alderman Dunn might have. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm done.
Anyone else? Alderman Gutenkopf.
I just want to say that I'm in support of the report. It's unsigned by me because I did not attend the meeting where this was discussed.
Very good. Alderman Dunn, I believe you're the one that requested this to be pulled?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that I think this is a great initiative. I'm glad to see we're expanding our recycling in the Central Business District. Appreciate the referral and the committee's work on this. Noted one of our speakers' comments in the public comment, Ms. Gerholtz from Cool Cities, talking about the benefits of recycling and how to properly manage that in a municipal environment. I do want to also specifically recognize the Emerson Earth Ambassadors, who gave a great presentation here 2 months ago. I think a lot of you will remember that. Very impassioned discussion from our elementary school students from the north side of town as to the benefits of putting recycling in the central business district, and I know they're going to be very happy to see this get implemented. My one question that I do have is the $10,000 a year collection fee to be taken from the general fund. I assume that is a temporary source of funding, that funding will be moved to the fees that all residents pay to get their garbage collected. Is that the intent of the committee, or is the general fund envisioned to be the long-term source of fund for that?
Alderman Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, since this is a pilot program, we needed to identify the monies to pay for the program. So at such time when we're going to review the effectiveness of the pilot would be about the time that we're going to be going through the budget process. So we'll look at it accordingly at that time.
I have nothing further.
Any other comments? I think we can do this by voice vote. All in favor of the report and recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. On to agenda item 6.8, a report out of Public Works. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask that you read the recommendation.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Works and Buildings Committee that new single-family home stormwater management policy as outlined above be approved. Signed by Jim Kennedy, Chairman, Chris Healy, Vice Chairman, Michael J. Bram, and Diane Gutenkopf.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the report. Alderman Kennedy with a motion, Alderman Healy with a second. Alderman Kennedy, your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a subject that we've been talking about in our committee for upwards of 6 months now. I wanted to thank the committee for all their work, thank city staff for all of their input and efforts, and the building community who've been part of these discussions pretty much since that 6-month mark. The reason for this is because we have a problem with flooding here in Elmhurst. And as a committee, we identified this as the #1 project that we could go after, that we could control ourselves. We certainly have a lot of work to do with the other taxing bodies of the Park District and the school board, but we felt this was one that we wanted to get after right away, because the main purpose of this initiative is to make the problem no worse. We know that whenever a new home is constructed and more impervious is added, it just makes the potential for the flooding that we know occurs in our town, the potential for it to be greater. So the idea, again, is make flooding no worse. There are comments that have been made that this is not going to solve our flooding problem. They're entirely correct. This will not solve those areas that have historically flooded around town, like Pine Street, Washington, and the list goes on. Everyone knows where those are. But again, this is our way to make the problem no worse. And so that's it in a nutshell. I know my fellow committee members are going to have other comments, and I look forward to those. Thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Alderman Hipskin.
I want to thank the committee for their hard work and the time that they've put into this. I've looked at the report quite a bit, and I hear what you're saying, and I definitely support a policy. This particular policy I don't support for a number of different reasons. As I did the calculations, I looked at certain lots. It's not a one-size-fits-all. I think that the 60% piece needs to, it was very hard to get to the calculations and understand them. And I just think that we need a policy that's more open-ended in certain respects, and other portions, equalized. By doing it, at 75 homes a year, I just don't see us really having a big impact. You take that 10 years, 750 homes, you take that to 20 years, you're talking, 1,500 homes over 20 years. I think that the systems themselves, I'm not sure about the technology itself and how long-lasting it is. So as we're 20 years down the line, are these working? Are they draining properly? Are they being effective? When I weigh the cost benefit, it just doesn't make sense. So I definitely support a policy. This one here, I'm not going to support because I think that there's too many open-ended questions for it. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did spend a lot of time speaking with members, at least the chairman and vice chairman of the committee, and I met individually and as a group with a couple of the builders, and spoke with the city engineer. I know it's a lot of work for the Public Works Committee, and I think I came up with about 17 different points that were of concern to me, and then in many cases deferred to the expertise of those who have studied it longer and who have something that sounds like engineering as part of their credential, which I don't. But the piece that I am most concerned about, I think, in this policy is the requirement to mitigate for 60% impervious lot coverage. I can go along with the piece of, I don't know if these different tanks or solutions are more effective than something else, but I think the policy as written allows the builder to choose different methods of mitigation, whether it be a Coltec system or a French drain, an Italian drain like in my household, or a under driveway storage, et cetera. But the 60%, and I think this is the example I've been discussing with people, is that if a lot has 50% impervious coverage and a builder comes along and maybe it has a driveway that goes around the back in the old house and it's torn down, and a new house is put up that maybe only has 45 or 40% coverage, then this policy would require that property to mitigate for 60% of impervious surface. And I've heard the arguments on both sides. On the side in favor of it, it's, well, if you do it now, it's cheaper. You'll know that you don't have to worry about coming back and looking at it in case someone puts something in. And someone who buys the house won't be surprised that when they go to do an addition, put on a new patio, that they'll find out that if you want to do that, you're going to have to put additional improvements into your property that you weren't counting on. On the other hand, the arguments could be answered this way. We'll know when they're putting something new in because the property owner will pull a permit. I think it affects the property rights between the homeowner or the builder and the subsequent homeowner. When you own the property, I think it's the decision of that homeowner or builder to decide if they want to put in up to 60% of mitigation now, or if they want to take a chance, and in the example I used, put in the mitigation they have to put in, and if they do something later, it might be a little bit more expensive for them. I also think it can work in some strange ways. I know that my neighborhood has some very large lots on it. It's like it's a double wide block. And so I was looking at my neighbor's house. Our lots are 50 by 350 approximately, which is about 17,500 square feet. And I know my neighbor plans on putting a new house on that lot. If they build a 4,500 or 5,500 whatever square foot home and they have so much excess land, they might have to do 6,000 square feet of additional mitigation when they may never build anything back there. They may never put an addition on. I assume they're building what they want to build. So I think it also is an unfair shift. I appreciate that the committee has talked about this is the first step, that as this policy goes out 2-3 weeks or 2-3 meetings down, there'll be a plan to talk about what happens in the case of an addition, what happens in the case of existing homeowners. I think for our purposes that the step should be to say as a policy, if you increase the impervious surface, that you are required to cover that. That achieves the goal that Chairman Kennedy talked about of make it no worse. If you take the impervious surface and you put something smaller, you don't get any bonus for it. But it doesn't shift unfairly the burden for mitigation to a property owner who might be making the property better, because then the question becomes, if I have a 40% impervious surface at the result of my construction, I've reduced it by 10%, why is that my burden? Why isn't my neighbor doing anything? He might be at 55% and doesn't have to undertake anything. I understand there's a reason to do it when construction occurs, but there is a cost, and we're putting a cost, which is essentially a tax on that homeowner, and that cost gets passed on to the homeowner. I'm not sure I'm prepared to make a motion. I'm sort of, at this point, stating it as a concern I have, that I think this policy would be effective. It would not make things worse. It would require anyone who wants to step over the maximum impervious surface line or approaches it responsible for whatever they do that makes it worse. And that, to me, after a lot of thought on this, is probably the better policy in my opinion. And I guess I ask for a response of points I might have missed from the committee.
Anybody else who has not had an opportunity to speak? Alderman Dunn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think with any policy, you want to make sure that it has a positive impact when it's implemented. And like some of the other aldermen, I did some calculations. I looked at some scenarios. I pulled out the Christopher Burke report from, it's been about 2 years now. There was some scenarios in there to help Elmhurst in our flooding situation, and one of them was flood-proofing homes. And there was a table in there for 250 homes. The estimation was $10,000 per home. You'd have a $2.5 million price tag to help significantly alleviate the flooding in those 250 homes. And in some of the other reports, we're talking about 300 to 350 homes that were significantly impacted by flooding. Also in the report, we talk about the compensatory storage in some of the open spaces around town. And one of them, Golden Meadows, was the proposal for that project initially was a $2.5 million project, same price tag as the flood-proofing, and you'd get 17 acre-feet of storage out of that for $2.5 million. Looking at this policy and putting in the compensatory storage on a house-by-house basis, you'd need about, in 8 years or so, you'd spend about $250 million, $2.5 million to put those tanks or rain gardens or whatever you would put back there at about $4,000 each. And you'd only accrue about 4 acre-feet of storage, which is significantly less than the open water sites that were being proposed. So I question the impact of this, and in addition, we all know we have a lot of clay soil here in Elmhurst, and that makes it even more convoluted to make this effective. So I do have concerns about the impact of this approach and how much storage would be accumulated over time. So maybe the committee can address that also. Thanks.
Okay. Any additional comments? Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a few things to say, and then I'll try to address some of the questions that have been asked. First, to me, this has always been about added capacity to the Elmhurst system. And by system, I don't mean the storm sewer system. By system, I mean the city of Elmhurst. We have a finite amount of land to work with. Some of it's public, i.e. schools, parks. Some of it's private, homeowner, business, what have you. If we have a shot to try to mitigate some of the problems that occur when we get 7 inches of rain in 15 hours, or any amount of localized rain that overwhelms the storm sewer system, we've got to use every square inch of land we can. I don't think anybody would refute that. Part of us wants to say, and certainly we've heard from the building community, and Alderman Dunn just mentioned it, just put it under the streets. Just put it to the parks, put it to the schools. That in and of itself will not get it done. There are plenty of areas in town that will not be served by any public or school piece of land, or running a pipe down a street, or putting a tank under a sidewalk, or some of the other less serious proposals that I've heard floated. So the question becomes, how do we use every square inch of land that we can? How do we add to capacity to the Elmhurst system? In my opinion, this formula does that. I think most of you know I supported a much more aggressive policy when this issue first came up several months ago, and I believe we're going to use a 750 cubic feet measurement. I was in support of that. We've since come way off that, and now we're using a nationally recognized, accepted way to calculate storm runoff. Earlier speaker was true. We have some variable amounts in there. Alderman Levin mentioned them. If we do something less than the 60%, or we do the amount of net new impervious, in my opinion, that is nothing more than status quo. And we know status quo isn't good enough. Nobody is suggesting, and I've heard a couple comments that concern me, nobody is suggesting that this policy in and of itself will solve or fix any issues. It most certainly is part of the solution. I've asked a few aldermen that have questioned me on this policy, and it's a rhetorical question, but I think common sense would dictate some level of a positive response. If the city council 20 years ago had implemented this policy, would it have improved things in July or June of 2010 or April of 2013? The answer has to be yes. Doesn't mean that it would keep water out of every home, but it would add a level of storage capacity that would never hit our storm sewer. And I'll stop for a second. Very typical of the responses we've been getting from some in the building community all along. Can't, won't, can't, shouldn't. But I remind the council, other builders have already started doing this in town. New builders coming into town are already doing this. Nitty, who bought the hospital property, has already committed to implementing private property stormwater mitigation, either through the use of permeable brick paver driveways or patios with sufficient storage underneath, or the use of in-ground tank systems. Any water that gets into those, whether it's in permeable paver or tank, any water that gets into those doesn't make to the storm system. And if it doesn't make it to the storm system, it doesn't flow downhill to the low-lying areas in town. Pine, Washington, Swain, we all know them. This is a part of the process. This is a good part of the process. Nobody wants to go first when it comes to something like this. The starting point. Nobody wants to be the flag in the ground. We have to start somewhere. I think Alderman Hipskin's numbers were fairly accurate. 75 homes on average a year. 750 in 10 years. 1,500 in 20 years. So 40 years from now, what does a town look like if 3,000 homes, or roughly a quarter of the stock in Elmhurst, has some level of stormwater retention on site? What does that look like? Now, some would want you to believe it doesn't mean anything. It won't work, can't work. Others in town would say it's a good idea. I'd suggest a lot more residents in town, including those who buy new homes, would say it's well worth it. Lastly, Alderman Dunn mentioned it. We can put a lot of water in Golden Meadows Park. We can put a lot of water at the Madison Early Childhood Development Center. One big problem. We need the other taxing bodies to say it's okay. Is it fair of us to expect them to say yes, which is a tough decision for them? I was on the park board. It's a tough decision. I myself have heard from members of the community that say, you can't put storage at Bryan Middle School. The York softball team plays there. They're under pressure. They will get kickback by allowing us to put stormwater there. It's absolutely the right thing to do, in my opinion. But is it fair for us to ask them to put water on their sites if we aren't willing to say, we're going to use every means at our disposal to put water where we can? In my opinion, this is good policy, it's fair policy, and needs to be passed. Thank you.
Alderman Levin?
You know, I'm not sure where the debate is going to go, but I'm not saying the policy isn't important. I'm not saying we shouldn't do something to have a policy. I think we're looking at the cost and who pays it. I think even if we had the policy 20 years ago and it wasn't set at 60%, but just anytime you build a bigger home, you have to do some water retention, I think we'd be in the same place, an improved system. I don't know what the public sites such as the schools and the parks, I'm not sure how it ties in here. I think I agree that there are different approaches we have to make, but I know you say you put it on their sites. I live here too, and I guess we need to keep working on our other public bodies to let them know how important this stormwater issue is to our entire community. But I haven't heard anything that changes my opinion in terms of making the policy such that if you build bigger, you mitigate, and if you make it the same or you make it smaller, you don't have to go to the 60% level. So I want to move to amend the single-family home stormwater management policy And I'm going to make it easy on Clerk Spencer,
Have it in writing.
yes, so that everyone can. But essentially, the effect is to change it to a policy where,
Alderman Levin, do you want to read your amendment?
well, I want to explain it, then when I say it, it'll make sense, if that's all right, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, we'll handle it. Thank you very much.
Is to achieve what I just said.
Alderman Levin, 1 second. You said it's your intent to make a motion, you have not made it yet. Is that
I will.
correct? All right.
So I'm moving to amend the 4th paragraph on page 2 of the April 28th report. I don't think I put page 2 on here, but it is on page 2, by deleting in the 3rd sentence the words maximum allowable, which would be in front of the impervious surface, and putting in lieu thereof the words actual post-construction, so they would read actual post-construction impervious surface. And by deleting the 4th sentence, which reads,
I think you misspoke, Alderman Levin. I think you mean paragraph 4, page 1.
I think it's on page
5.
I'm sorry, it is page 1. Thank you.
Paragraph 5, page 1.
Right. Paragraph 4, page 1?
Paragraph 5, page 1.
Leading that paragraph. That's exactly what
I think it's paragraph 4, Mr. Chair. It's the 3rd sentence that would... So the sentence that reads, "It is recommended this formula be applied to the
Got it.
maximum..."
Go ahead, Alderman Levin.
"To the maximum allowable impervious percentage lot coverage," and change it to the, applied to the actual post-construction impervious percentage lot coverage, and then taking out the last sentence, which talks about the policy for going to 60%. And that is my motion.
One second, Alderman Levin. That's the beginning of 4th sentence. Alderman Levin,
Yes.
could you approach the chair for a minute?
I get in trouble?
I don't think it does. You're talking about here? Apply the formula to the actual post-construction impervious lot coverage. Fine.
And then
What do you
take
want
out the last
deleted?
sentence. The next sentence. They're both two paragraphs.
This one here, mitigation for displaced undergrounds, that one?
Yeah.
What about this here?
Well, you can leave it there.
okay, because
That is just fine.
So this last sentence,
Yeah.
so that's it. Does that achieve what Alderman Levin's trying to do? Do you have a copy of this report, Jim?
not pretty, no.
Well, I mean, you want to give it to Clerk Spencer. I have to read it.
She has the.
Okay. I have a motion to amend the report by Alderman Levin, deleting the words maximum allowable in the 3rd sentence of the 4th paragraph and replacing those words with actual post-construction, and subsequently deleting the 4th and last sentence of the paragraph. Got it? Oh,
And it's striking this whole
that's
sentence
why.
right here.
That's why it didn't make sense.
Yeah. You're striking all of that,
Sentence before.
this, right. It would just be removable.
We have clarification, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Is it the 4th and 5th sentence that the alderman is proposing to delete, or just the 4th sentence?
That's only this first, second, third. Okay.
Third sentence?
Okay. So, 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph. The 3rd sentence in that paragraph begins with, "It is recommended that this formula be applied to the maximum allowable impervious lot coverage." The motion is for that sentence to be amended, it is recommended that this formula be applied to the actual post-construction impervious lot coverage, then deleting the next sentence, which is applying this formula to the maximum allowable, deleting that sentence, which is about 2.5 lines, and then the paragraph would finish mitigation for displaced groundwater to the end. So that is a motion. We have a motion to amend the current report, deleting the third, deleting two sentences in the, two letters in the third sentence, and replacing with actual post-construction, and deleting the immediately following sentence. Is there a second for that motion?
I'd like to further clarify the motion if I could.
Well,
I need a second.
I second it.
Alderman Dunn will second the motion. We have a motion to amend and a second, deleting the words maximum allowable from the third sentence and replacing with actual post-construction, and deleting the fourth sentence, which immediately follows that. That motion to amend is before us on the floor. Any additional conversation or comments? Alderman Dunn.
I support taking that particular requirement out. I think the last thing we want to do is incentivize a development project to build to the maximum impervious, because you have to equip your property with the flood mitigation at that level, so you might as well build to that level. Some might take that approach, and I think it's the wrong incentive for a development project to have that be the default, that you have to provide compensatory storage to a 60% level when you may actually be at 40%. I would think that would be wrong, so I support the motion.
Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the committee and staff for all their work on this. It's been, I know, a long process, and I appreciate the time that everyone's taken and for the city engineer meeting with me to help explain how this will play out. As the DP&Z committee and Public Works committee have been working in parallel, us talking somewhat about impervious surface limit, and Public Works talking about how to mitigate in part for new homes to mitigate for flooding. It was my understanding that our committee was going to be coming up with the number, the impervious surface limit, and that would be used to say, all right, nobody can build beyond this point, or even consider the question, somebody may have impervious surface on their property beyond this point if they fully account for it. And I thought that at that same time, Public Works would be taking a look at how to account for water on properties of new homes. And I thought the significance of the impervious surface limit was truly to say, you're not going to build out past this point, not as a limit to say all homes, regardless of your size, will store for this much. So I have to say I was surprised to see that number being used in this way. That said, though, I fully agree with the committee in that we need to apply this formula to new homes. I think we need to recognize that the Burke report talks about newer homes in the directly connected impervious area and how that water contributes to our flooding issue. And I think that we need to continue on each avenue, partnering with our other taxing bodies, as well as looking at new homes, existing homes, buyouts. So I think that we're not going to fully solve it with any one of these. I think somebody mentioned, well, maybe we should account for the net impervious, the net increase in impervious, and I think that that's doing too little. But I do think that if we require this with the amendment that was suggested tonight up to the actual impervious area, I think that we or achieving what we're seeking to do, is making an impact with this policy. Thank you.
Alderman Deuter?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a clarifying question. I guess it's the 5th paragraph starts with a phrase or the sentence that says, the maximum allowable impervious lot coverage shall be 60%. Is that just intended to clarify the number that gets plugged into the formula, or would this policy, if it moves forward, set the maximum at 60%?
If I can answer that is relative to this formula only. To put that number in place is an actual amendment to the zoning code. So that will have to go through the public hearing process.
Is it the intent of the committee that this is?
Mayor, you have some hands over
I'm sorry. Well,
It's relative to this.
Alderman Healy?
Just to directly answer Alderman Deuter's question, the intent of that sentence is to clarify that 60% is the maximum. Further in the report, it says, however, should DPZ and therefore, and then the city council say that maximum buildable lot coverage is 50%. The report this policy goes to 50% in terms of amount of stormwater to be accounted for. It does not, as City Manager Grabowski said, it does not set the maximum lot coverage at 60% for building purposes. That has to come out of DPZ and then get passed by the council. That is there just to clarify. This policy as it stands now is 60%. If DPZ comes out with a lesser amount or a stratified amount, as has been suggested, larger pieces of land would have less stormwater or less percentage. This policy would revert accordingly.
One second. That's okay.
That comment needs to come out. That's in contradicts. Scott. Hey, Scott, why didn't you delete that paragraph?
Okay. Well, Alderman Levin, as the mover of this motion, City Attorney has been trying to get my attention. In the 5th paragraph, the first 2 sentences, to make your motion a little clearer, I think it's recommended that the first 2 sentences of the 5th paragraph be deleted, and that the last sentence read, calculated runoff volume using the NRCS formula applied to the actual post-construction impervious lot coverage shall be provided for all new single-family homes.
Well, because the report doesn't have any conclusion in terms of what's being enacted, I thought I was trying to do enough, but I think what the city attorney is suggesting clarifies it further, so I would agree to that if Mr. Dunn.
Mr. Dunn, are you okay with that adjustment?
Yeah, I would suggest that we remove that whole 5th paragraph.
The last line
Any
stays.
value added in that paragraph?
The last line is pretty
Unless we need
specific.
it.
I think the last line might help. The last, my comment is only that maybe I might agree, but maybe the last line probably would help.
Okay, that's fine.
Kind of sum up what I understand to be
So-
Alderman Levin's.
Approval from Mr. Levin and Mr. Dunn, you're okay with
Yes.
all right, so Clerk Spencer, and clarify for the council, there is a motion to amend. Based on city attorney recommendation, we're going to alter that a little bit. Motion to amend by Alderman Levin, deleting maximum allowable in the 3rd sentence of the 4th paragraph and replacing with actual post-construction, deleting the immediately following sentence, the 4th sentence of that paragraph, and then in the 5th paragraph, removing the first 2 sentences, starting with the maximum allowable impervious lot coverage and ending with impervious lot coverage. Those are the 2 sentences to be removed. And then also altering the last sentence of that 5th paragraph the calculated runoff volume using the NRCS formula applied to the replacing maximum allowable with actual post-construction impervious lot coverage shall be provided for all new single-family homes. I do think that makes the amendment a little clearer. I would ask, is there anybody on the council right now who does not understand the intent of the amendment, which is basically to remove that requirement that would allow any new homes to do compensatory storage up to 60% regardless of their lot coverage? Does everyone understand the current amendment? Okay, I think we got that clarified. Back to the discussion. Alderman Gutenkopf.
I understand the current amendment to be an attempt to completely remove from the city staff the tools that we need to address an incredibly serious problem that affects our community. By altering those two paragraphs and by completely rewriting that fifth paragraph, what we've done is remove everything that Alderman Healy just spoke toward, that the policy was intended to reflect the decisions made by the Development Planning and Zoning Committee regarding total percent of lot coverage allowable in Elmhurst, that we have done a completely inconsistent thing here by saying that if we only address the immediate building needs and then come back in the future if someone wants to add a swimming pool or a patio or a garage on their property, that they can add the stormwater then when it's more expensive instead of allowing for the potential to build out to the maximum coverage on their lot now when they're building a brand new house and it's much cheaper to dig up underground. It's completely contradictory to the conversation we had 2 weeks ago about when and how we add additional construction to a site. I think it's a strong policy the way it is. I think the fact that we've identified a percentage of stormwater consistent with the allowable building code today is an important point we need to keep in mind. And that this is a problem that is citywide, and everybody in our community is going to have a hand in fixing it. We've gone 4 years now since the initial storm. We face deep criticism from residents about not addressing this seriously and not taking any policy steps toward making Elmhurst less likely to flood. And by having this debate today and watering down this very strong, well-crafted, well-defensible policy, we're still dragging this out even more. We cannot sit back and wait until we come to an agreement with the other taxing bodies in our community over whether or not that land will be available and hang all of our storm water management on that. We have to start taking steps. This is a clear, simple, defensible step that we can take toward managing stormwater on the site where it falls. The more water we can contain, the more water we can slow down, the more water we can keep out of the system that we know gets overburdened, the easier it will be on everyone. And to have this conversation about whether or not we're only going to compensate for the new construction versus the amount of lot coverage that anybody is allowed to have by right, by the current code, just becomes petty. Let's pass this policy the way it was written. Let's defeat this proposed amendment, and let's move on. Let's start dealing with stormwater in Elmhurst now.
Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to highlight for the council, right now, I believe the maximum percent of a lot under roof is somewhere around 30%, depending on lot size. Is that correct? Somewhere in that
It's
range?
30%. I don't believe it varies in lot size.
Okay, fair enough. So thank you very much. Right now, the maximum allowable impervious on any lot today is 100%. We would allow anyone to cover with concrete or asphalt 100% of their lot. And we've allowed that since new home construction came in earnest around 1990 or so. Whether or not that's happened, I can't put a number to it, but it's been allowed, and there's nothing that stops us today from putting a limit on that. Alderman Dunn brought up the question about building out to the maximum percentage. The economics of a project are going to dictate that, and the other thing that's going to lever against that is the 30% maximum quantity of area under roof. In the end, this is a discussion really about the cost difference. And certainly all the points that Alderman Gutenkopf made, we're paying lip service to this problem if we don't go to the maximum allowable. If you look at the difference between old home, new home, and assuming there's an increase, and then the new home to going up to the maximum requirement, it's a matter of a couple $100, $300 to $500 or something in that range. If you look at a house that's going to be built, say we pass this amendment, which I believe is not a good idea, new home is constructed, 5 years from now somebody wants to add on the sport court, swimming pool, whatever, the amount of money they're going to need to spend to put in the mitigation at that point is going to be a number probably twice what it would have cost the original project. So instead of it being $3,000, which we've talked about, it might cost them $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 to do that. So I think it's logical to do it right up front. The other part of this is that what we're talking about here in this amendment is putting the needs of new homeowners and their desires ahead of the needs of current and existing residents. We're saying, you know what? We're going to let the homeowners of the new homes, they're going to put a burden on the rest of us just because they're new homeowners. I don't buy it. It's not right. And you know, the one thing I find very interesting in all of this, through 6 months of work on public works and all that, not a single homeowner has contacted me, has come to one of our meetings, and to the best of my knowledge, not contacted any of the members of the committee saying that this is a bad idea. And you know, to add on to what Alderman Healy said, we've got Nitty Construction who's voluntarily going to put 55 new homes up with on-site detention in a project where they wouldn't have to put that on more than 10 or 12 if this policy came about in its form of going to the maximum percentage. So I'm dead set against this. I don't think it really, you know, by not having this piece in here, it means this is a very weak policy, and we're just going to allow the fact that we're going to go ahead and just deal with the flooding as we always have. Just let it happen.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm gonna hit some of the same ideas that Alderman Kennedy did, but with slightly different thoughts. First, I certainly respect Alderman Levin, and I certainly respect his right to make an amendment on the dais tonight. I wish he and I would have had a chance to discuss the proposed amendment prior, and I could have shared with him some of the thoughts, because we did address some of the concerns in committee, specific to net new impervious or just the size of the new, to compensate for just the actual size of construction. And Alderman Dunn talked about incentives, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But this amendment, if it passes, would be a disincentive for a builder to tear down a home and have a vacant lot for some period of time until they build a new house. I mean, we'd have to finally craft the ordinance so that if the house was torn down, it was post-construction of the original home that was there. So if the land was vacant for a year, that wouldn't count as zero. That would count as the maximum. There's another problem of what happens if a builder keeps the home up, rents it, and puts a sport court in, puts a driveway in, a driveway spur, a patio, what have you, and that actually drives the impervious number up, and then eventually they tear that house down. What is the post-construction at that point? Is it based on prior to the builder buying the home and adding to the impervious, or is it based on the net impervious when the house comes down? So there are some questions that would need to be answered that I'm not comfortable with. Now, as far as an incentive to build out to the max, and the example Alderman Dunn used, 40% going to 60%. If you go from 40% impervious to 60% impervious, that's a 50% increase in the size of the project. I don't know, I mean, the economics alone of that kind of increase would be huge to avoid putting in stormwater mitigation that, you know, would cost $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. I don't know that that's an incentive to build out to the max. People are gonna want what they're gonna want, and having to go out to the, you know, we should build to the max because that's what, you know, we'll have to put stormwater in anyway. Okay, but from that point on, they wouldn't be able to put in a lot of other things just so they could get to the max. So I don't know about that rationale. I actually think this policy does the opposite. I think this policy, the original report as submitted, incents the builder to think differently. It incents them to put in a permeable driveway with some level of storage underneath it. Not only would it not count as impervious surface, it would count towards some level of detention. Same way with a brick patio, a permeable paver patio. That would serve to decrease the amount of impervious and increase the amount of compensatory storage required. So I think this policy, as written, does what we want it to do. Two final points. Cost has been raised. The issue of cost has been raised. Who is bearing that cost now? Who is bearing the cost when we flood now? It's the city of Elmhurst, and it's the residents whose homes flood continuously. So I'm not in favor of putting cost on any one group. And I think it was Alderman Brand that said it. These are costs that are going to be shared by us all in some form or fashion. So the idea that these costs are being unfairly burdened by one group, I don't accept. We're all paying them. We're all going to pay them if the park district and if the schools allow us to use their land. Who's going to pay to do that maintenance and that improvements? We all are. So the idea of cost, we're all going to pay the piper at some point if we truly want to try to mitigate the problem. Finally, and this is what I started with, to me this has all been about increasing capacity of the system. The proposed amendment to the report, which I will not support, reduces the amount of capacity. Plain and simple. And if you are in support of less, if you're in support of status quo, I understand the support of the amendment. I am not. Thank you.
Alderman Plumsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick point. I appreciate all the comments from Alderman Healy. A lot to think about, but I think that this is, no matter which way the council votes, this is not status quo. In fact, after talking with city staff, I thought that we were comparing ourselves to other communities, and I don't know of one that has this codified, that these are suggestions used in other communities, and this would be, we would be, you know, one of the first to do something like this, at least around here. So I think that regardless of how this turns out tonight, we are making a significant improvement, and one that we don't see in surrounding communities. Thanks.
Alderman Dunn.
The comments have been made that, pardon the pun, if we go forward with this amendment, it would be watered down. But we have not mentioned the fact that in this particular report that the policy is proposing to no longer allow direct connection of sump pumps and downspouts to the storm sewer. I think that's a pretty big deal, that flow will not be going directly into the storm sewer. It will be going over land, and that's a major improvement. And then the first sentence in that third paragraph, the purpose of the new single-family home policy is to provide storage volume to offset the increase to stormwater runoff volume that may result from a redeveloped property. And I just don't think throwing a 60% number is consistent with that theme, and I think that's a good theme. That paragraph sort of sums up the benefit of the entire document.
Wagner?
Thank you, Chair. More of a clarification point. What's the DPZ's involvement with this report?
Well, the DPZ is going to ultimately determine the maximum allowable impervious lot coverage. That's before them right now, but they were waiting for Public Works Committee to see if this tied in. So they are still considering that. Alderman Levin.
To Alderman Wagner's question first, it is on our agenda, and I imagine in the next meeting or so it will be addressed. So I think that's an issue that's separate from this. I'm concerned, I don't think any alderman up here would want to say that they're not very concerned about flood control and wanting to take steps to mitigate flooding. So when you say this is watered down, that we're doing less, this amendment isn't trying to sidestep the need to do flood control. It's a question of fairness. I think Alderman Healy said he wanted to incent the builders. I think they are incensed. Is that what you were saying, Alderman Healy? Yeah.
Some of them at least.
Some of them are. But it's also, it's not a fair argument to say we're all going to pay, because we're going to pay the park district and we're all going to pay, you know, to manage those lands and the school lands, because the owner of that new home is also going to be part of the general public that's paying for all those things too. They just have to pay a little bit more. It's about property rights in a certain sense. I understand that if a builder came to me and said, you know, Mr. Levin, we're building a new house for you, and if you want to do something in the future, you ought to put in 60% mitigation right now, or you're going to pay a whole lot more later, I might very well say, that's a good idea, but that's a property owner's decision. When clients come to me as a lawyer and I say, well, you could do this, you could pay, or you could pay me later, because it's going to cost you a lot more if you don't take care of it now, that's their decision. I don't make them do what they don't want to do with their property, and that's why I see that here. So when we talk about, you know, we're going to make others do that, we're not saying to everyone in the community we're all going to share in this. We're not saying everyone go out and put in 250 cubic feet of storage, because that'll have a huge impact. This is something that's tied in to new homes, and there's a reason why to do it for new homes, but let's not pretend that the fact that homeowners haven't come to the meetings is because it doesn't affect them yet. If you pass that policy on to the council and we talk about it, you will hear from them. You know, so I think this does something. I mean, I think we heard the comment about, you know, put a pipe down First Street. We know that we can't put more water into Salt Creek, and so we're trying to keep it slow down, and I think the policy as amended will help do that. So some of the questions that were raised about what happens if you make the lot vacant, and then it doesn't disincentivize a builder from tearing a old house down and leaving the lot vacant. The policy can be crafted, interpreted to say whatever the last improvement was on the property. So again, I'm not against mitigation. I don't want to make this look like we're trying to do less to protect the residents than we are. It's a question of fairness, and if subsequent policies from the committee come before the council that apply to all equally, then we will look at those as additional requirements for those property owners who happen to be new homeowners. I think this policy is good. It's better with this amendment.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to address a couple of things that I've heard. Because for me, it's not a problem that we're first with something. I think Elmhurst can be a leader. I think Elmhurst can take a bold step and say that this is an important way that we can address these flooding issues. Just because we might not have identified neighboring communities that have similar policies, A, doesn't mean they don't exist, and B, doesn't mean that it's bad. So let's be first. Let's be bold. I think the property rights issue is a red herring. I think it's a way to try to avoid addressing this issue, because you could apply the exact same argument to all zoning codes. And if you're going to say that the city has no right to tell a homeowner how to use the land, you've officially negated our entire zoning code. So we're not going to do that. We're going to strengthen it. And we're going to strengthen it by requiring that people participate in flood mitigation in a community that has serious flooding problems. We've attacked one piece of this property issue by addressing new home construction. We still have, as Alderman Kennedy has pointed out, other policies for existing homes and for potential remodeling and additions. It's cleaner to address it by individual pieces than to try to find a one-size-fits-all solution, because there isn't one. But new home construction has a certain similarity about it, as do additions to homes, as do existing properties. So I'm not going to fish for that red herring. I'm not going to catch it, and I'm not going to run with it, because our zoning code is strong. There are reasons why we have these kinds of policies and why having regulations that are similar throughout our community are important, and I think that's what's at work here. Thank you.
Alderman Healy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I promise this will be the last time I speak on the issue. After the meeting, I'm gonna get with Alderman Levin, and we're gonna set up an appointment that he and I can play tennis Thursday morning. We could just go back and forth and save some time. I really do understand the argument and the concern about the fairness issue. I understand why some builders might want to say you're picking on us. I understand it. I wish we had a way to create a policy that impacts all 14,000 homeowners in Elmhurst right now. I wish we had a good way of doing that, but we don't. So how do you eat a whale? One bite at a time. Alderman Gutenkauf's comments were good. We're starting here. We will follow up soon thereafter with an existing home policy. This council and future councils have to think in terms of stormwater management with just about every decision we make. Some in the community want to say, oh, you're just going to do this and that's it, and you're doing it for political expediency, and the heat's on you. Yeah, the heat's on all of us. My home hasn't flooded, knock on wood, thank God. But I've stood in plenty of streets and plenty of homes where people have had 3, 4, 5 feet of water in their basements. And I know many of us, if not all of us, have had similar situations. Some of us have flooded. Where do you start? So to me, it's not about an issue of fairness. It's about an issue of starting now and continuing the conversation. We were challenged in committee by one of the people here today. Well, what are you going to do about the Addison Street deck? I know what I want to do with the Addison Street deck. I want to make sure we properly mitigate stormwater for the Addison Street deck. And for those that want to say it's 100% impervious now, or pervious now, and we shouldn't have to, I don't accept that. But this council and future councils have to think stormwater management every step of the way. I believe that. This is a start. It's a good start. It's a fair start. And I'd ask for your support. Thank you.
Alderman Palomsky?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After listening carefully, I am struck by Alderman Kennedy's point that, the amount of dollars spent between the storage at 40% versus 60% is relatively low. I'm now inclined to support the committee. However, I think we need to take a look at how this plays out, and especially how it matches up to how we proceed with additions and how we proceed with existing homeowners. So it's been a good discussion. Thank you.
Alderman Dunn.
Again, I think we have a strong amended policy. One other point I want to make is that we are, in the calculation, we have a 100-year flood that we're calculating the storm water runoff on, 7.58 inches of rain, a 100-year flood in this particular calculation. We mentioned the words factor of safety in the policy. That's a pretty good factor of safety. I think the only change is to soften that hard impervious number of 60%. There's many aspects to this policy, and they're all pretty strong, and varying that slightly, I don't think it damages the impact of this policy.
Okay. Seeing no other comments except the one from Alderman Kennedy, we'll
One
go to
final
Alderman
comment,
Kennedy.
if I could. If any of us believe that 7.58 inches is a factor of safety when we've had 3 such storms in 5 years, I don't think that's proper use of the term. Thank you.
Okay. I'd ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll on the motion to amend the report.
Levin.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Nay.
Palumski.
No.
Graham.
No.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York, absent. Healy.
No.
Onquist.
No.
Kennedy.
No.
Mulliner.
No.
Wagner.
No.
Gudenkauf.
No.
Reuter.
No.
Dunn.
Already called them.
Oh, I called Dunn, that's right.
You giving him another shot at it, Clerk
I'm
Spencer?
giving him another shot.
Say
I
yes for this.
apologize for that. You
Want
do
to change
that
your vote,
twice,
Alderman
huh?
Dunn?
Okay. It's 3 ayes, 9 nay. 10. Oh, 10. I apologize for this. Okay, let's start over. 3 ayes, 10 nays, 1 absent.
3 ayes, 10 nays, motion to amend fails. On to the original report. I think we've exhausted conversation. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to call the roll on the original motion by Alderman Kennedy and Alderman Healy.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Onquist.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gudenkauf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin.
No.
York, absent. Levin.
Aye.
Okay. 12 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 absent.
12 ayes, 1 nay. That motion carries. Report's approved. That's everything for the consent agenda. On to agenda item number 7, reports and recommendations of appointed elected officials. 7.1, Mayor Morley. 2 quick announcements. The Historical Museum will be starting a new exhibit, Cubs versus Sox, the Chicago Civil Wars, starting May 16th, and that runs through September 28th. And I invite all of you to join me, along with Phil Schwartz from Channel 7, in Wilder Park on the 13th of this month. Phil Schwartz will be doing a live broadcast highlighting everything that's going to be happening this spring in Elmhurst. One side note, it's at 5:30 in the morning. Look forward to seeing you all with me. City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. I do have a few things. A reminder that the last spring cleanup is this Saturday, and this is for those who have the regular scheduled garbage pickup on Fridays. This past weekend, the police department conducted a collection of unused, unwanted, and expired prescription drugs, and I'm proud to say, and pleased to say that they collected 461 pounds of expired, unwanted, unused prescription drugs. So thank you to the police department. And lastly, just an update on the Route 83 work. That's an IDOT project. What they're doing is patching the bridge over Salt Creek. The word we've received is that within maybe the next week, they should have an additional lane open, and that will help resolve some of the traffic issues on there. But a reminder that after the Route 83 project is done, they're going to be replacing the bridge over Salt Creek on North Avenue. And so they'll be shifting the traffic, and North Avenue will most likely be backed up as well. We've been working very closely with IDOT on both projects and pushed very hard to make sure that they were separated. Initially, they wanted to do them together. We pushed them to separate them, and they acknowledged the issues. So thanks to Public Works for keeping an eye on that. That's all that I have.
Any other reports or recommendations? Alderman Honquist?
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to announce that Alderman Kennedy and I are going to have a town hall meeting on Thursday, May 15th at 7:30 at the Community Bank on the second floor.
Very good. Alderman Bram, do you have something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could please request of the city manager to update us. I believe that we were targeting the end of April for the marketing communications position to be filled. And then my second request, sir, would be for the two committee chairs of DP&Z as well as Public Affairs and Safety to speak to the request that one of our residents here tonight made in regards to where we're at with chickens. The report, the
Yes, I
discussions
understand.
only, where the discussions are at, not to get in the details of the discussions.
Chickens, got it. First question?
Thank you. We are in the interview phase for the communications director position.
How many did we get?
We will be interviewing 6 individuals.
But how many?
Oh, to start, we had 120, 130 applicants for that position.
Okay, and we're down to 6?
Yes.
Okay. I know that chickens are pending before Public Affairs and Safety. Alderman Wagner, care to comment?
It might, yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It might even be both committees. I think it's somewhere on the pending item.
DP&Z deferred.
To me. So I think what we're trying to do is wait for some additional information from staff.
Okay. Waiting for additional information from staff. I'm sure Alderman Wagner will get you additional information when he has it. Alderman Bram. Okay. Seeing nothing else, we'll move on to other business. 8.1, a proclamation. I'm going to ask Clerk Spencer, if she would, to join me over at the podium there. Clerk Spencer, would you join me?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Wonderful.
Get up, Mark. You gotta stand up and do it.
Clerk Spencer, good to see you. They're for you. Okay, as it states on our agenda, do you have the agenda? Okay. So, I want to make sure I get the week right. May 4th through 10th is Municipal Clerks Week, yes?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Okay. Well, and nobody appreciates our municipal clerk any more than I do. Clerk Spencer is a devoted and dedicated clerk. She's just someone who's absolutely fantastic to work with. She's a straight shooter who always tells you what she's thinking and always tells you what's right. And most importantly, she keeps our records straight. So we'd be lost without you. And that,
Except the roll call sometimes.
and that having been said, if you would indulge me, Clerk Spencer, I'd like to read the whole proclamation.
I would love for you to.
Oh, wonderful, okay. City of Elmhurst proclamation, whereas the office of municipal clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world, and whereas the office of municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants, and whereas the office of municipal clerk provides the professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels, and whereas municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all, and whereas the municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community, and whereas municipal clerks continue to strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of the municipal clerk through participation in education, programs, seminars, workshops, in the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, and international professional organizations, and whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the Office of Municipal Clerk. Now, therefore, I, Steve Morley, Mayor of the City of Elmhurst, do hereby recognize the week of May 4th through May 10th, 2014 as Municipal Clerks Week. We have two deputy clerks in the audience with us. I'd invite them both up, Ellen Cyprian and Aaron Vanderwall. Please join us up here. And I'm going to turn over the microphone to Clerk Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Municipal clerks have deputy clerks as well, and I would be remiss to not recognize our two deputy clerks who run the day-to-day operation of the clerk's office, and they are Aaron Vanderwall and Ellen Cyprian. And I have a certificate of appreciation for both of them, and I'd like to read it to everyone. Certificate of Appreciation, Municipal Clerks Week 2014, awarded tonight, the 5th of May, 2014, to Aaron K. Vanderwall and Ellen Cyprian for carrying out the duties of the deputy clerk with integrity, professionalism, dedication, and care. Thank you, Aaron and Ellen.
Good? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll put this in my office with pride.
Well-deserved recognition. Thank you again, Clerk Spencer. Any other business? Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up on the important stormwater discussion we had, on our next agenda, we will be discussing how we're going to handle existing homes and how they want to, how they may need to mitigate for additions and other increases to the impervious. We'll also ultimately be talking about a fee in lieu of structure, should that be an option on those properties, as well as, in general, a program for people to do an incentive for more flood storage should they choose, and how we may as a municipality participate in that as an incentive standpoint. So that's our marching orders going forward, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, great. Any other business? Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My time on the, I had this prepared a couple weeks ago, but we had a very long meeting. In my time on the council, I've not known of an agenda item that propelled more residents to voice their opinions than food cart vendor licensing, which is known to most as the hot dog lady. It occurred to me that for many, the topic wasn't truly about the placement of the cart itself. It was bigger than that. And many residents identify with the idea of a small business operating in Elmhurst, any small business, and the idea that their participation can contribute to its viability. Understanding that we're all in agreement that we want to support Elmhurst businesses, I'd like to encourage all of us to think 350. That's the 350 project. Each month, if you are planning to spend, choose 3 businesses in town you would hate to see leave and spend $50. With a collective, concerted effort, we can make an impact to help retain the businesses that contribute to the charm and character defining our community. I encourage everyone to support local businesses, support our community, and think 350. More information on the 350 project can be found at 350project.net. And I saw one of the businesses in town had some marketing materials up on their wall about this project.
Okay, very good. Any other business? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Alderman Dunn with a motion, second by Alderman Mulliner. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.